What is going on, everyone? Season 18 of Apex Legends has arrived, and with it brings my best settings that you can and or should be using this season. I have some changes from the previous season that I do want to go over, plus some recommendations based on what you are looking to achieve and what your skill level is. Kicking right off, we're going to start with Interact Prom Style. I do default for this because I like to see what I am picking up. I like all that information. If you don't want as much screen clutter, you can do Compact. Button hits I do as off because I've played this game for a long time. I don't need the button hits on. If you do want the button hits on, maybe you're new, you can turn this on. Crosshair damage feedback I do as off. You could have X, or you could have X with shield icon. I personally don't think that the crosshair is really needed when you are getting the damage because you had the damage numbers. You don't really need the X on screen. I find that it just clutters up my aim and it's not really necessary. If you are a Watson or a Caustic player, you could do this as X just so you know when your gas or your fence ticks someone, you will get an X on screen if you're not looking. But even then, you are going to get an audio indicator if someone does cross your gas or your fence. Damage numbers I do stacking. You definitely don't want off, and I think floating or both is just not necessary. It's too much on screen. Ping opacity I do default. Sometimes I find faded ping opacity. I just can't see it at all, so I like to leave this as default. Obituary is on. That should be your kill feed. Minimap rotation I do as off. A lot of players will like this on. I always like my minimap to be pointing north. If you like the map to rotate when you are looking around, you could do this as on, but I like to have it off. Weapon auto cycle on empty. I have this as on, so if I run out of ammo, my gun's gonna switch automatically and right away for me. Auto sprint I have as on. This will save your left stick if you are a controller player. This way you're not going to go through controllers quite as much. Double tap to sprint I have as off. Jetpack control I have as hold. If you don't have paddles and if you do not play claw, you could have this as toggle. It'll be a little bit easier for you to move around when you are using Valkyrie's jetpack. Otherwise, I think hold is the way superior option for Valkyrie's jetpack. Incoming damage feedback I do just 3D. Taking damage closes death boxes or crafting menu. This has to be off. It's the biggest thing every season. If this is on, you're going to go in for that armor swap. You're going to take a little bit of damage. You're going to get ripped out. You're not going to get the armor swap. You're going to die. So make sure this is off. Hop up, pop up. I like to have this as on. This just shows what hop ups you do have equipped to your gun, like skull piercer or double tap or that type of thing. These last few settings are going to be based on what your needs are, but streamer mode I have as off. Anonymous mode I have as disabled. Usage sharing, this sends data to EA to like fix their game and stuff. I have this as enabled. I don't really care. Cross-platform play I have as enabled. Performance display I have as off. If you do want to see your frame rate and or your ping, packet loss, that type of thing, you could turn this as on. I leave it off because I record videos. I want my screen to be as clean as possible. Club invites I have as disabled. Communication filter I have everybody. Reticle and laser sight I do the same for both. It's 12, 255, 12. I find this nice little green one works very well, and I would encourage you to use it as well. Or, you know, anything on the right here is fine, or you can just do red and leave it as default. As for accessibility, this will again be based on what your needs are, but colorblind for me is off. A lot of people do like to try Trinopia. I personally used to use this, but I don't anymore. I just use the default colors. Subtitles I do as off. Subtitle size I have normal. Enable accessible chat features I have as off. Disable voice chat. I actually have this on. I don't have any voice chat in game. Personally, I just find it very frustrating when people are not having great microphones, and more times than not, this is the way it goes. Convert incoming voice to chat text I have as off, and play incoming text chat as speech. I have this as console setting, which is off. I'm going to quickly go over the video and audio tabs before the controller tab. Brightness I'm having about halfway right now. You could do a little bit more than half so you aren't missing anything that's dark. It's going to depend on your monitor really. For me, right in the middle seems to work fine. Field of view I got 104. You definitely don't want anything under 90, but I find anything over 90 is going to be acceptable. Don't think about it too much. Obviously, the higher this is, the more you can see around you. I do 104 because I do like to be punched in a little bit and not be at that max. Ability scaling, I have this as disabled. This is something like when you use Octane Sim, FOV will change. I don't want this. I want my FOV to be the same all the time. And then sprint view shake, I have this as minimal. I don't want my screen shaking when I am running and sprinting. It just seems very unnecessary and I might miss something. Audio, this is going to be based on what you need, but I will recommend that dialogue music and lobby music be down to like 10 to 20%. You don't want any of these overpowering in-game sounds, so I leave these pretty low. And then sound effects volume I have at 100, and my master volume's down a little bit. This is more so for my streaming and recording setup. All right, the controller tab, the big one. Button layout, I do button puncher. This is gonna really depend on you. I use an Xbox Elite controller with 2 paddles on the back for jump and crouch, so I do button puncher. Basically, this just swaps the crouch and melee button, so I'm not gonna accidentally hit in that right stick, accidentally melee, and I'm gonna die because of it. This just swaps them. Doesn't really matter for me because I, again, use paddles to crouch. But actually, having a right stick as crouch is pretty good regardless, so I would recommend this. If you don't have any paddles and you want complete control over your character, I do think Evolved is the best button layout that you can use. This way, you're going to be able to control your character completely. You're going to be able to aim, you're going to be able to jump, crouch, shoot, slide, all that while still being able to move your character. I do think evolved is the way to go if you don't have any paddles. Stick layout for me, absolutely. You're going to want to use default. I mean, you could use some other ones, but you're a crazy person if you do that. Interact reload, you're going to want to use tap to use, tap to reload. You could do tap to use, hold to reload. I don't think this is good at all. And then, of course, you got the opposite, hold to use, tap to reload. I don't think any of these are good. You just got to do tap to use, tap to reload. Crouch button, you're going to want as hold if you do want to do bunny hopping a little bit easier. Some people will want toggle because it is what like Call of Duty is in other games like that. For me personally, I think hold is the best way to do crouch, and you're going to find a lot of pros use hold as well. Aim button, I also do as hold. Survival slot, I have as on. Trigger dead zones default. Menu cursor speed, this one's a pretty important one, often gets overlooked. You want this to be basically as high as you possibly can within your ability to control it. So if it's too low, you're going to be just looting really slow. And if it's too high, you're going to be going all over the place, not being able to control it. I like to do somewhere in the middle, maybe just under half. This way I can have a little bit of speed in my looting, and it's not overpowering me, or it's not too slow. Look sensitivity and ADS sensitivity. This is where things get a little interesting. I have two recommendations. I'm gonna start by going over what my settings are right now that I am using. If you are coming from other games like Halo, Call of Duty, any other shooter really, I think that these are gonna be the optimal settings, but in the long run, I do think you should be switching to something else. So let's go over this for starters. Look sensitivity and ADS sensitivity, I'm doing 4-4. This is pretty typical. You know, you could do 5-4, you could do 5-3, 4-3 is what a lot of people use as well. I do 4-4. I like to have a little bit more movement in my cursor speed. Per optic settings, I'll just share these for you. You can copy them if you want. In general, you're gonna want that 4 to 10 times area to be a little bit higher than the lower ones. This way you can move those big optics a little bit quicker. As for the response curve, I'm using classic. This is pretty integral. Classic is a very classic feel. I come from Halo, Call of Duty, Destiny, all these old school games. I've been playing shooters for 25 years, so I'm using classic. It's what I've always used, and I don't really have the time to switch to something else. Look dead zone, I have as small. If you don't have stick drift, definitely use none, but I do have a lot of stick drift, so I'm doing small. Movement dead zone, I have as small. Inverted look, I have as off. Vibration, I actually have as off. I don't like my controller shaking when I'm shooting my weapons. I find it makes me miss a little bit more, and of course, I think if your hands are just not shaking, then I think your aim is gonna be better. Some people need that feedback to know when they're getting hit. I just don't need it. I've never used vibration since like Halo 2 back in like 2005, so I really just don't need vibration. And then advanced look controls, I have as off, but I will go over this in a second. But first, I do want to go over what I do recommend if you are looking to really push your skill a little bit further. Classic is good. 4-4, 4-3 classic is great. It's a very consistent feel, but I don't think it's going to be as good if you are looking to get better in the long run. If you are looking to perform similar to a pro player, a lot of pros, almost all of them, not all of them though, some are still using classic, but almost all of them are doing 4-3 linear. This means your aim is going to be super consistent. Every time you move the stick, it's going to be 1-to-1. There's no ramp up, there's no slowdown like classic does. And I do think that 4-3 linear is really just going to provide the most consistent experience, especially when you're in close range. Close range really is what matters in Apex Legends. All fights are going to come down to the end game. It's going to be a close range fight. And when you're in the close range, you can move much faster from left to right and be very consistent with your movement. So I do think 4-3 linear is probably the best settings that you can run in game if you are looking to one mag people and have the most consistent aim assist and really overall just aim in your game. I, again, just don't do 4-3 linear because honestly, I just don't have time to practice on it. If I did, maybe I would, but right now I'm doing 4-4 classic. But I think if you are looking to go on top of the game, if you're not coming from other shooters as well, I do think 4-3 linear is probably something better that you should start with. Quickly gonna go over advanced look controls. There was a period of time where a lot of players were using these, and some players and some pro players do still use these. I don't think it's necessary anymore. But if you do want advanced look controls that are similar to classic, which is again what I am using, I do recommend that you have your dead zone as low as possible without you having stick drift. Outer threshold should also be 1%. This is going to give you the maximum range of motion. You can move your stick either a little bit or all the way to the end. You're going to have that full range of motion. Response curve, this is going to be based on whether you want that classic feel or a linear feel. The higher you go, the more kind of like ramp up it's going to be. The lower you go, that's more like linear. So this is something that you can do. I do 8 because that is similar to classic. I'm doing 135, 120 for the yaw and pitch speed, 130, 120 for the ADS yaw and pitch speed, and then 0% across the board on the other ones. I don't want the more I look left and the more I look right or up and down, I don't want it to start going faster because this is just not consistent really. And then target compensation, you're going to want this as on. This is basically your aim assist, so if you don't have that on, good luck, GG's. Melee target composition, this is your melee aim assist. You want this as on. Target composition style, if you're on PC, this will just be PC, or this might not even be here. If you're on console, you're gonna want to do default because that's the maximum amount of aim assist that you can get. Again though, I actually just don't recommend that you use advanced look controls. It's not necessary really at all these days, and I do think that 4.3 linear or 4.4 classic is the best settings in the game that you can run. Let me know in the comments down below, what settings are you using this season? I can't believe we are at 18 seasons of Apex Legends. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more. I have so much more content on the way that you're not gonna want to miss. As always,